I'd like to explain to you the difference between the Davidic and Mosaic tabernacles and how it relates to you and your Christian walk with God today. The Mosaic tabernacle was an Old Testament tabernacle, and it was when they sacrificed bulls and goats to put off sin, and that was a requirement of the old law in the Old Testament. And there's a transition. You can see them as dispensations in the Bible, and you can see a transition in our relationship with Jehovah from the beginning of the Old Testament to the end of the New Testament. And we need to follow the New Testament requirements and see how they transition from the Old Testament to the New Testament. Now, the Mosaic tabernacle was instituted to handle sin of the people. The sin was handled because it was put off through the sacrifice of lambs and goats. There was a scapegoat that was pushed into the wilderness, and then I'm sure some wild animal got it, and that was called the scapegoat, and that would put off the sin for another year. They would also sacrifice the animals in the tabernacle or the temple itself, and that would also put off the sin for a year. And they would have the blood of lambs and goats. Now, in the New Testament, under the gospel, well, the next step was the Davidic tabernacle, and the Mosaic tabernacle ended. It was replaced with the Davidic tabernacle, and the emphasis was on worship and praise. Now, the requirements were still there to put off sin. So, lambs and goats were still sacrificed. There still was a scapegoat, but the emphasis in the tabernacle was not all about the blood and the gore and the nastiness of sin and the incense. The emphasis now was praise and worship of Jehovah. So the Davidic tabernacle was modeled after David, who praised and worshiped God. And his tabernacle is prophesied and is eternal. The kingship of David is also eternal because it was adopted by the King of England and the Queen of England. They claim their authority flowed through the kingship of David, and it flowed then through Scotland, and then eventually through England. And in fact, the throne of David sits behind the Queen's throne in England, because that's their claim of authority, of power, essentially through David and then from God himself. So to this day, we still have a sort of Davidic tabernacle because we give God the sacrifice of praise, and not so much the sacrifice of bulls and goats for sin. Because we have the perfect lamb who has sacrificed himself on the cross, which is Jesus. So we don't need to sacrifice bulls and goats anymore. In fact, we don't need to sacrifice each other either, because we have the perfect sacrifice, which is Jesus, the perfect lamb for our sins.